Good evening, greetings, whatever time of day this is for you, and welcome to the April 20th, 2020 podcast for My Spectrum Life. I'm Jessica, an autism mom, and with me is my co-host, Kelsey.
Hi, how are you doing? Hope everyone's doing really well.
I'm glad your neck of the woods had some storms last night, I hear.
Yeah, we had some severe storms coming up through the Gulf, the whole South. So we're very blessed not to see the damage.
Yeah, we just got a lot of rain, which makes for a very grumpy child.
Yeah, can't go outside and get that vitamin D.
No, well, and sometimes he doesn't even want to do that in the first place. So it seems to be a problem more recently with kids as they get older, is not wanting to go outside and get that vitamin D that they need, but because of the allure of the screens, for whatever reason. But anyway, I am so glad that everybody is listening or watching. How have you been doing? You had with the restrictions in your area.
Correct. So we did have some restrictions. Today, our governor in the state of South Carolina said some non-essential businesses can open up. So they're slowly but surely opening up some of our cities down here in South Carolina. How about you?
In Tennessee, it looks like the governor is going to allow. He's going to be working with different areas, but he's not going to extend our. The latest thing that I heard was he's not going to extend his orders past May 1st, but there are some other powers that be that get to say certain things. So, as always, we just want to remind everybody to listen and make sure you're following the guidelines for your area, especially when it comes to opening things back up and doing what they ask you to do. Especially when you start coming back together in your groups, your friends and family and everything. So it'll be great to be able to go out again and be more than six, to give some people a hug for once.
I am looking forward to that. I am so looking forward to giving some people
I know, me too.
So
yeah. So one of the behaviors that we didn't, or I guess, would you call it more of a classification of behaviors that we didn't talk about last week?
I would, because last week we talked about stemming, which is a behavior because it has a function to it.
Right.
So I would say it's a classification of behavior. So I think tonight we're going to end up talking about self-interest behavior, aggressive behavior, and sensory issues, correct?
Yeah. Then we'll dive into the sensory issues, which that one could take a long time, several podcasts to go over because there is a lot there.
There is. In itself is, so we'll go ahead. So I just want to state that you have two forms of aggressive behavior. You have self-interest, where you inflict harm to yourself with the intention of bruising, harming, or that deep tissue contact. And then you have aggression behaviors, which is any harm inflicted upon another person. That's hitting, kicking, biting another person. That's slapping, flicking. There's so many. Some of the examples of self-injurious behavior are biting oneself, poking. Another one that I've seen is literally throwing themselves on the ground and flopping like a fish. There's ones that will literally headbang is the most common one, especially in school settings, is that.
Right.
With that being said, these are the classic behaviors that you tend to associate autism with. Each self-injurious behavior and aggressive behavior towards others, or maybe an object, meaning they throw desk or something like that, is all a form of communication. What is the function of that behavior? Why are they doing it? What's their purpose? with that being said, I would suggest contacting a professional such as a therapist, a
Mhm.
trusted doctor, pediatrician, all the ones that we first talked in our first podcast about who you could reach out to. Talk with
Right.
them, be honest about the behavior, even if it's
Oh, yeah.
raw emotions for you as a parent. The
Mhm.
more open and the more you're realistic about the behavior, the better results you're
Right.
going to see, because what they're going to conduct is called a functional behavior assessment.
Right.
What are they doing? Is it a certain type of day? Is it something outside causing it? With
Right.
that being said, which is going to tie into your sensory, um,
Mhm.
is that self-injurious behavior can also be because of GERD, which is
Right.
gastro.
Oh, the reflux,
It's the
whatever it is.
reflux, correct.
Yeah.
Could be from asthma, could be from
Mhm.
not being able to, get some of that deep sensory that they're looking for. So that's some of them.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
from there, the FBA will tell the therapist and trained therapist how to
Mhm.
better help your aggressions or the aggressive behaviors,
Right.
because each
Mhm.
case is different. Because when you see one kid with
It's
autism,
it's
you only
autism.
see
Let's see.
one. So
One with
correct. So one
autism.
plan to if two people are having head banging behaviors,
Mhm.
their plans are not going to look the same. How they address it is
Mm-mm.
not going to be the same. And that's for a different podcast to be able to go into technicalities of how to address those behaviors. But I
Right.
wanted to bring light to some of these behaviors because these are the ones that we often see when we're out and about. These are the ones
Right.
that we see, um, where you see people kind of like, do I help? Do I not help? Am I supposed to be
Yeah.
judging? I don't know what to do kind of
Yeah.
behaviors. And
Well, and then there's also the sometimes you just come across, it's the one thing where you come across people in public and you may come across a child who is having a meltdown versus a temper tantrum.
correct.
You know, and there is a big difference in those. And that's a topic too for a different time. Just because you see somebody in a store and if they're, they may not be throwing a temper tantrum. It may be an autistic meltdown, and there is absolutely nothing you can do.
Nope.
You have to step back and let them get it out because there is no way you can reason with them.
Nope. Their
Um,
logic is gone.
yeah, yeah. So, but we can get into more in depth on that if that is something y'all want to discuss it on a different show. Just drop us a line and let us know, or let us know in the chat. We'd be more than happy to cover that one as well. Anytime you have a topic or a question, please feel free to email us at info@myspectrumlife.com. Again, that's info at myspectrumlife.com. And that functional behavior analysis, that FBA is actually something that can be done within the school system as well,
Correct. Mhm.
because there came a point with in my son's third grade year, I think it was, where there were so many behaviors that I myself knew were related to sensory
Correct.
and not having the sensory input that he needed throughout the day, different avenues and ways for him to talk to people or somebody that would understand his autism and understand that he may not be able to get all his feelings out
Right.
or not understand what the kids are doing on the playground, that kind of a thing. When those things happened, he would have some different behaviors, escape behaviors, things like that.
Mhm.
And we wound up in our IEP meetings discussing different things, and it came down to, okay, let's perform a functional behavior analysis on and see what's going on. And when it came out, that's exactly what they found, that it was all either escape behaviors and he needed that sensory input. So um, those FBAs are very, very important. When it gets to that point, especially um, when you have when you're in the school setting and you can't figure things out, um, that's, don't be afraid to have them. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent or anything, but what it's going to do is help you
And
understand
sometimes
your
it
child.
doesn't mean the kid is a bad kid or is a behavioral kid. It just means to get the qualifications and to have the school underneath FAPE, it has to be labeled as behavior to be able to
Mhm.
get that help and to be able to, able to serve them appropriately.
Right.
There's a lot of stigma with an FBA and behavior on an
Mhm.
IEP in a school system.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, at first, I can tell you to be honest, at first I almost felt, I knew what it was for, and I almost felt like, in the situation that I was in, my situation, this is not, everybody's
right,
situation, but the situation that I was coming from, it felt like the teachers, my child's teachers at that point in time, needed that information coming from the psychologist saying that the school psych, saying that they had sat there and they'd gone through all that to prove what I had already told them. And it did help in some extent, but not as much. But that's just
right,
my experience.
right.
That's my own personal experience. I am not one to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the saying goes. Uh, I look at, there's always, I guess, having my son have autism has opened my eyes to looking into what's okay. We have the behavior. What's the antecedent or what's happening before that? What's
Right,
causing this? You
right,
don't necessarily have to think about a lot of those things if you have a neurotypical child.
right.
Um, and because most of the time they can just
Straight up
tell you.
tell you. Mhm.
They're going to tell you, and they may be sassy about it, but they're going to tell you. But
Which goes into what Jim and Leanne Curtis, they said from a layman's point of view, temper tantrum and meltdowns are a lot alike, and they do have both. They do. But that's where the ABC and the antecedent or the function, the behavior comes in. Okay, is this a sensory meltdown and I can't tell you, or I'm not getting my way and I'm going to try to pull one over your eyes. So you are
right.
correct. They do look a lot alike, and there's a very fine line
Oh yeah.
between the two.
It is a
So,
very fine line between the two, and and I guess that's one of the things that is difficult, especially for extended family members. If
mhm,
you're not around a child with autism um, as often as the parents are, the parental role you get used to, and
mhm,
what's gonna trigger them. I can, I will know. Okay, back off. I can tell myself when I'm trying, in the process of trying to correct Curtis for something. Um, I can tell if things are getting to be rough, and that's
mhm,
when I let him, because I know that his escape behavior is something that's helping him. It's actually not hindering him. Escaping from a situation sometimes can help them understand what's going on versus keeping them right there.
right,
It's part of that function. When you know that that function of escaping helps them go and process,
right.
and then they can come back to you, and then you can have a conversation.
Mhm. Yep,
It's so important to know that function behind the behavior and to think about those kind of things. But we
exactly.
can that's probably going to have to be something that we
Really
delve into a
discuss,
lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up for us.
For
So
sure.
sensory issues, that
Mm.
is a biggie. That's a biggie. I did not now in my experience,
Mhm.
Curtis was actually diagnosed with sensory processing disorder before he was diagnosed with autism.
Okay,
Um, his first two diagnoses were sensory processing disorder and ADHD combined type. So, which was interesting. One of the things I found is that most of the time it's really difficult. I haven't met that many people who have a child on the spectrum
Mhm.
that don't have other diagnoses. Um, it opens up a whole being on the spectrum usually means that there's gonna be some other players in there too.
Underlining, right.
Mhm. And that's one
Mhm.
of the
It's
interesting things
intriguing.
my behavioral pediatrician always told me, "Now remember, you're gonna
Huh.
have these things that present themselves first."
Mhm.
And so, like, for instance, the ADHD,
Mhm.
when my son's ADHD is taken care of, that kinda peels back that layer. You
Right.
get Shreky on you. Shrek and the Onion, and the layers. It's all about Shrek here.
It is all about
So
Shrek.
so it you tear you each diagnosis is like a layer, and once you peel that back to, get it under control, then you can figure out the underlying issues
Right.
that you can get down to the basic of it and help, and that's when you can start to help. Um, I I didn't understand, and I've learned a lot of the information from my occupational therapist and from the book The Out of Sync Child, by Carol Stock Krenowitz. Um, I am so glad that my first occupational therapist suggested this book. I really am. Because it was a lifesaver. It totally helped me understand so much better. Because I had no idea. Um, when in school, we're taught that there are 5 senses, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Not until you get up to higher school or college, but yes.
And not until you delve into something that has to go with psychology and behavioral issues because,
Yep.
you think taste, touch, smell, hear, see. Um, if you actually do an internet query and you just type in how many senses do you have or do humans have? You get all sorts of answers because we were actually doing this. We are talking about this, prior to going live. I had answers from, as low as 5 on up to 21 or more. I couldn't believe it.
I only knew
21
6 or 7 of them.
I know. I was like,
Hold on,
I didn't
21.
that's gotta
What?
be I'm thinking that's gotta be some scientist and
Some
neurologist that's very, very
subcategories, man.
specialized. Yeah. Yeah,
We're
it's
getting
gotta
some
be specialized kinda
yeah.
stuff going on there. But one of the things that you'll see on an OT report, you'll see things like vestibular,
Correct.
proprioceptive, interception, auditory is a big one.
Auditory?
Um,
Yeah.
that is, a huge one. They'll start talking about those, um, different things, and then you start, you can once you do the testing, once you go to an occupational therapist, I mean, if you get the diagnosis of sensory processing disorder or sensory integration dysfunction, correct?
I
I
believe so.
think that's it's one of the 2, but it's the, sensory integration or sensory processing disorder is, gonna be your technical term for it, but an OT can help you so much.
A lot.
Um, give you exercises, help you figure out what in the world to do with your child that's just doing like, I couldn't figure out why Curtis would go and just start walking up. He just, just at a slow, steady pace, walk himself into the wall. Just thunk, thunk, thunk. And I'd be like, what is going on? Go to an OT, put that down. He's craving deep pressure.
Correct.
And so now he knows instead of walking into the wall, can I have a bear hug? And so we'll just grab him and just, give him a big old hug. And then he's be like, and you can just see it just come down off of him.
Right.
Another tool we were talking about, the weighted blanket.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot of studies and a lot
Mhm.
of myths with distorted facts with weighted blankets.
Yes. So you can purchase weighted blankets at, say, Walmart or Target anymore.
Mm.
Um, some people like them, and um, they can help give you a sense of more of security, especially if you suffer from anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, but one of the things that I had to learn very quickly, I was like, okay, this weighted blanket thing might be something that would be very helpful for Curtis. And I was looking into purchasing a weighted blanket. But in order to purchase by the way, thank you very much, Meredith. I'm glad you're enjoying the information. Um, back to weighted blankets. I I mean, I actually I like to have a little bit of weight on
Mhm.
me at night in bed, but my weight comes from my mom has made me some heavy crocheted Afghans,
Right.
and it's just enough, and it's like, oh yes, it feels good. The stuff that you buy at, say, Target or Walmart is not necessarily going to give your child the
No.
therapeutic input that they need.
No.
You need to speak with your occupational therapist.
So why is that? What did your OT tell you?
My occupational therapist told me that if I was going to make a blanket, it needed to be 10% of my child's body weight.
Mhm. Mhm.
And depending upon how much of their therapy that they have, the OT will be able to tell you how much input they need if it's,
Correct. And
you know,
when to.
exactly.
Mhm, so they pretty much give you the instructions and the recipe for cool
Hmm.
words
Yeah.
for it.
I wound up going and I wound up talking to my sister, and because what they tell you to do is put these little weighted beads in it.
Correct.
They're basically washable pellets that they put like in, say, Beanie Babies or something.
Right.
And you just need to weigh those. And I talked to my sister. I was like, okay, I need to weigh these out. I need to do this.
Right.
And we talked about it on the construction of the blanket as basically a quilting type thing. And so I've made one for Curtis. He also received one from a charitable organization there in South Carolina called Clap Your Hands.
Yes.
Love those guys. They gave Curtis a blanket that was so helpful for him. He actually got to, as he got older and he gets heavier, see, he needs more weight. And so
Correct.
what we wound up doing is combining the two blankets on him.
Correct.
So when he's having a really tough day, um, we put the blankets on him.
What's his
Another
behavior look like with the weighted blankets? How do you know when to put it on him? Like, what's his telltale sign?
His telltale sign for him lately, I can see that he gets agitated. He starts getting really frustrated, like if he's doing schoolwork.
And you
He
could
does
say,
not
right.
like. I mean, I don't know what child likes to hear, "You need to show your math work. Show your
Nobody.
work." Nobody likes to see that.
Okay, so it's just you just picking up on some of his
Mhm.
telltale to be able to.
Yeah. And you'll be able to see that with each individual as with your own child.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where I I talked every week. My OTs would check in with me and, have any questions, how's he doing? And I'd talk about different things and give him as much information as possible, and they would give me as much information back. So the more that you give information to your therapists,
Mhm.
the more they can better work with your child.
Correct.
And that is so important, to be open with your therapist.
Even if you just tell them too much, the therapists know what to sift through and what not to. They
Mhm.
know what to focus on.
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Yes.
So,
Yes, they do. Um, I mean, we even sometimes would make you can make, the weighted blankets can go into therapy, the weighted vests,
mhm.
and lap pads,
Correct.
which you can make some of those for at home, but then there comes a point at which they can be written into the IEP, correct?
Correct. Some of my students, when I did severe special ed, some of them had a hard time sitting still and they would try to get up and move. And I was like, so I talked to my OT and PT, of course, went through all the channels that I was supposed to go to, and they suggested a weighted blanket. Sure enough, 5 minutes every hour, whole different kid. Whole different kid.
Yeah.
So yes,
exactly.
it can be. It is underneath FAPE. If you've gone through your FBA like you're supposed to with the school, it sure can.
That's what I never got to where I actually wound up giving to the school and providing to the school the things that Curtis needed.
Oh, wow.
He had a weighted lap pad that I made for him. Then they also put it into, I wound up then, he would play with that too much, so we wound up putting it in the backpack for him to wear, that he was supposed to just wear the backpack from class to class, as he went to to the cafeteria or to recess.
The transitioning.
Yeah, the transitioning to help him out. So Jim and Leanne Curtis, which that's hi mom. She made him, she's asking me in the comments, does he still use his stretchy sock thing?
Oh, I love that thing.
I
love it. So much fun.
It's called, the technical term for that is a body sock.
It is a body sock.
And he loves it. He still loves that thing. That's another thing is that spandex on him. He just loves to get in that and then just stretch that. And that just,
as the right appropriate tension back, right?
Yes. And he gets in that thing and he loves it. He'll just sit and it calms him right down.
Real quick.
Yeah. It's another tool that we found in, when we were doing, at the occupational therapy. That's another thing. If you're looking for, it just dawned on me, you need to make sure you're looking for an occupational therapist that has the tools that you need. And another important thing to have is a sensory gym.
Yes.
Because then they have the things like, oh gosh, what else? They had the hammocks, they had the body sock,
swings, the monkey bars, the climbing of the wall. They had the barrel. I mean, anything you can think of at a jungle gym or an obstacle course,
right.
They had. It was,
and it's
I wanted to play on it.
And it's all therapeutic grade. And so there was like, they would come up with different colors of the different materials.
Correct.
Would give more pressure or more tension. Just like, you think of going to physical therapy after you've had an injury, and the stretchy bands they have that you do some exercises with. The black band, if I remember right, and I'll figure this out sooner or later, the black band I think has the least amount of give, whereas I think it's like the red or something like that is very stretchy. A lot easier for you to pull when you're doing your therapeutic exercises, which those bands can also be used as a sensory tool in school.
It can. Used to put them at the bottom of my kids' chairs, and they would put it in between because you'd create a loop, and they would put it in between, and they would kick it like as if you're playing with the rubber band, and they would just kick. So they're getting that movement, and they were paying attention. They're like, okay, I'm not fidgeting. It's pretty much I'm fidgeting in a more appropriate way.
Yeah. Well, and that again, that fidgeting is a function.
Yes. That's right.
Yep. It actually helps them to, they need to be doing something to fidget in order to help them listen and to focus. And I don't know why, but it works. So,
not going to question it.
Yeah. If it helps them focus and they're paying it, it helps get them in the zone for school or, what have you. Go for it. Just as long as, of course, you got to make sure it's not disrupting everybody else.
Correct. Which the team and the school, including you, because you have a say, is going to be able to determine how to do that.
Right. And then outside of school, say if you're in, scouting groups or at church groups and stuff like that, you can, work with your those in charge
Mhm.
to get those tools to be able to be used
Mhm.
so that your child can participate
Mhm.
just like every other child.
Exactly,
There's
and this goes back to you talking about in our a couple other episodes, being open with the
Mhm.
community and being open, saying, "Hey, my kid is autistic. This is what helps them, and so and so," and tell him like, "Look, I'm giving you the tools."
Right.
Right.
Don't exclude him when you're right there trying to give the tools and be there.
Correct.
You know, I I have come to realize that if you get there is a point at which if you are in a group and it's just not working because they are not still not wanting to use the tools. We came across an instance and a point in our scouting career that it was too cumbersome. Things were not going as the way that, Curtis needed to be able to, and he was becoming a distraction. And so he wasn't enjoying it. We weren't enjoying it. And we know everybody else wasn't enjoying it. So we said, okay, enough's enough. This is not for him.
Nope. And that's
Just
okay.
just like any other neurotypical kid. You can try soccer, but if they can't kick the ball, don't make them do the soccer. They probably are better at, football or something.
Right.
I mean, Curtis really loves soccer, but he's learned from Soccer Shots, which is a great nationwide program, and they have a special needs empower group. So, there are organizations that are willing to work with you. So just it's out there. So, you have any other words of wisdom tonight?
I think you did a phenomenal job.
Thank you. Uh, we just learned a lot from our OT, and then kept
Moving
using,
from there.
yeah, because you would sit in on
I
some
mean,
of those.
OT is integrated with ABA.
Yeah.
And some of those, sometimes we do see the function of behavior, but we can't teach a better appropriate behavior or appropriate behavior until we can address some of the sensory and address you to bring you back. Okay, you're with me now? Let's go over what we need to go over now. It's
Yeah,
all
exactly.
it's a holistic approach. Yeah. OHOLSTIC. Yep. Approach where everybody works together as one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I appreciated about the company that we were that you came from when we were there in South Carolina, is that they really looked at making sure that, it was okay for you to sit in on those OT sessions
Mhm.
and see what they were doing so you
Mhm.
could understand, and then, write notes and stuff like that, because they were only once a time. And, if you have a OT organization or a speech pathologist or things that are willing to work with your ABA therapist, that is going to make that your, therapy as a whole so much better.
It does. It does.
So, well, I think that covers tonight's topic, because there's
Correct.
so many more to do.
There is more.
So how can people reach out to us?
You can reach us on Facebook.com/MySpectrumLife, Instagram.com/MySpectrumLife, and Twitter.com/MySpectrumLife1.
And anytime you have a question or something you want to discuss, drop us an email at info@myspectrumlife.com. Again, that's info, INFO, @myspectrumlife.com. And as we always say, remember, with a lot of faith, a good, huge amount of love, and don't forget them fidget toys, we're going to make it.
We are going to make it.
See you next time. Bye.